Have you ever wondered how many times being good actually earned you respect? Ever felt like the more you tried to please, the less you were valued? What if your obsession with being a good person is precisely what's destroying you? As Niccolò Machiavelli said, everyone sees what you appear to be. Few feel what you really are. The truth is simple, but it's brutal. You're tired. Maybe you don't even know why, but you feel it. You feel like you're carrying an invisible burden, a constant obligation to keep everything balanced, to please everyone, avoid conflict, be understanding. From a young age, you were taught that being good was the way, that good people win in the end, that if you're just fair, honest, and humble, the world, in its inherent justice, will recognize it. But what if all of that is a comfortable lie? A script you were given to keep you obedient, predictable, manipulable. How many times have you silenced your voice to keep the peace? How many times have you swallowed tears, anger, or pride just to avoid disappointing anyone? How many times did you let someone humiliate you and still smile, saying, "It's okay"? This goodness they told you was a virtue? Maybe it's just a leash in disguise. The world doesn't reward the good, the world rewards the strategic. And if you're listening to this, it's because you felt it firsthand. You've been frustrated being the nice guy, the understanding person, the friend who gets everything, and you've realized with a quiet pain that the more you give, the less you receive. The more you bend, the more they demand. The more you try to be accepted, the less you're respected. This is where Machiavelli steps in, not as the devil history painted him to be, but as one of the first to have the courage to speak the raw, unvarnished truth. Pure morality, detached from reality, is a trap. Being seen as good isn't the same as being effective, and living to please everyone means becoming a hostage to your own kindness. This video is an invitation to break free. Let's tear through the veil of moralistic lies together. Let's expose the discomfort, the dark, necessary truth behind the obsession with being good. You don't have to become cruel, but you need to wake up. Because as long as you try to please everyone, you'll be a slave to the image they've built for you. And if you're tired of being used, ignored, and discarded, maybe it's time to learn from Machiavelli what they never taught you. How to stop being too nice and start being respected. Are you ready? Then come on, because the transformation begins now. The lie of being good when virtue becomes a cage. You grew up hearing that the right thing to do was to be a good person. That kindness begets kindness. That if you're just honest, fair, and patient, the universe will conspire in your favor. But what if I told you that this idea is a carefully disguised trap? That goodness without strategy is just bait in a world that operates on self-interest, on dominance, on utility? The truth is, being good in the common sense has become synonymous with self-erasure. Being good has come to mean not asserting yourself, not saying no, not causing discomfort. Being good means silencing your own pain so you don't inconvenience others. And the most perverse part? The more you try to be good, the further you get from who you really are. Being good as they taught you means forgetting yourself to fit into others' expectations. It's being an actor on a social stage, reciting lines you no longer believe. And the audience applauds, but not out of admiration. They applaud because it's convenient. Because as long as you remain predictable, accessible, and docile, you're harmless. And what doesn't threaten isn't respected. Machiavelli, in his brutal clarity, said that the ruler who wishes to be merely good will end up destroyed by those who are not. Goodness, by itself, isn't virtue. It's naivety. And naivety in this world is an invitation to abuse. A man who desires to act virtuously in every way will inevitably come to ruin among so many who are not virtuous. Niccolò Machiavelli, the Prince. Reread that sentence. Let it sting if it needs to, because that cut might be the beginning of your freedom. The truth is, you were raised to please, not to live. From an early age, you were taught that your acceptance depended on your obedience. Don't shout, that's ugly. Swallow your tears. Be a good boy, girl. And so, little by little, you learned that feeling was wrong, that reacting was rude, that setting boundaries was aggression. You learn to emotionally mutilate yourself to be accepted. But the question I ask you now is, accepted by whom? Respected by whom? Valued by whom? Because in the end, even doing everything right you still feel invisible. You still have to beg for recognition. You still live with the feeling that you're always in debt, always falling short, always almost enough. This is where the collapse begins. Goodness has become a prison. You're trapped in a decorated cell with pretty phrases. You're so kind, so understanding, always so balanced. But behind every compliment, there's an unspoken demand. Continue erasing yourself so I can feel comfortable. And you continue even when it hurts, even when it boils inside you, even when your silence screams from within. The tragedy is that you confuse this suffering with nobility. You think you're doing the right thing, that you're being honorable, but the world doesn't see your intention. The world reacts to your posture. You can have the purest heart and still be trampled, because purity without presence is just another victim on the ground. Goodness without strength becomes currency for the cunning. It becomes an excuse for exploiters. It becomes the main course for emotional predators who feed on your guilt, your hesitation, your desperate desire to be accepted. And the more you try to show you're trustworthy, the more you become a tool, not a person. A tool. Have you noticed this? Have you noticed that those who command respect don't need to explain anything? Have you noticed that those who have boundaries, even if they're not always liked, are heard, while you, with all your kindness, keep being interrupted, overloaded, forgotten? This happens because the world doesn't respect the agreeable. It respects those who impose consequences. Machiavelli wasn't an advocate of cruelty. He was a surgeon of reality. He looked at the world and saw what no one else wanted to see. Morality, when blind, is a strategy of domination, and whoever lives to appear good will sooner or later lose everything, even themselves. The good person who refuses to face the game becomes a disposable piece. You can give everything, time, affection, loyalty, but the day you're no longer useful, you'll be ignored. And the cruelest part? Without guilt, without resentment. After all, you never demanded more than that. The world understands boundaries, it doesn't understand sacrifices. So here's the first uncomfortable truth that needs to be said. Your goodness is imprisoning you, not because it's wrong, but because it's being used against you. And as long as you keep hiding behind the image of a good person, you're denying your strength, your voice, your dignity. The psychology of the submissive. Why being nice is seen as weak in the world's eyes. You weren't born wanting to please everyone. This hunger for acceptance, this urgency to avoid conflict, this fear of inconveniencing others, it was learned, conditioned, imposed. From a very young age, you understood, perhaps without words, maybe just with glances and subtle punishments, that being your whole self wasn't enough. You learned that love came with a price, and that price was your silence. As a child, all it took was saying, "I don't like this," or "that hurts me," to be told you were spoiled, ungrateful, or overreacting. All it took was crying at the wrong time to be reprimanded. All it took was being your spontaneous, emotional, honest self to be molded. And you molded yourself. It started with small gestures, a forced smile here, a fake "I'm fine" there. Soon it became a way of life, swallowing insults, giving in before being asked, pretending not to care. All of this became routine because at some point in your story, you learned that your emotional survival depended on not being rejected. The problem is, this adaptation turned into submission. It became an automatic mechanism of self-abandonment. You became a master at sensing what others want to hear, at reading the room, at measuring your words, at anticipating disappointments, just to avoid the discomfort of being disliked. But you know what's most cruel? You think this is empathy, but it's not. It's fear. Fear of being rejected, fear of being judged, fear of being called selfish, difficult, insensitive. Fear of being who you really are, with your boundaries, desires, anger, and voice. And as long as you live this fear disguised as kindness, the world reads you exactly for what you show: weakness. Machiavelli knew this. He didn't talk about psychology in modern terms, but he understood the human soul like no one else. He knew that people respect what imposes consequence. He knew that whoever never threatens, never confronts, never asserts themselves is never taken seriously. And this applies to you. You can be kind, but if you never take a stand, You'll be treated as a tool, not as a presence. You can be generous, but if you never say enough, you'll be drained to exhaustion. And the worst part? No one will feel guilty about it because the world doesn't measure goodness. It measures utility. And if your goodness is always offered without criteria, without reciprocity, without pause, it stops being a virtue and becomes a resource. Have you noticed how nice people are always chasing, always justifying, explaining, apologizing for existing, while those who set boundaries, even if less likable, are heard, respected, remembered? This isn't a coincidence. It's psychic structure. It's hierarchy of emotional power. The submissive lives with fear of being abandoned. The assertive lives with clarity about who can stay and who can go. The submissive hides behind masks of empathy. The assertive shows their face, even when it's uncomfortable. The submissive expects their goodness to speak for itself. The assertive knows that without presence, there is no respect. And here's one of the biggest emotional confusions of our generation. The idea that being nice is the same as being good. It's not. Being nice is being agreeable. Being good is being just. Being nice is avoiding conflict. Being good is facing what's necessary. Being nice is smiling on the outside while bleeding on the inside. Being good is saying, "This hurts me and I won't accept it anymore." The psychology of the submissive is, in fact, the psychology of fear. Fear of breaking fragile bonds, fear of not being loved, fear of losing a space that only exists because you agreed to live bent over. But here's a raw truth. He who lives in fear of being abandoned is already abandoning himself every day. And if you continue living like this, afraid to displease, afraid to be misunderstood, afraid to be yourself, you'll end up empty. You'll look in the mirror and no longer know who you are. You'll live being everyone's favorite character but your own, because the price of submission is self-extinction. Machiavelli would say, "It's not about being loved, it's about not being ignored." And that only happens when you have the courage to assert yourself, to say no, to represent consequence. Of course, being cruel isn't the solution, but being harmless isn't either. There's a middle path, but it's only accessible when you understand that being submissive isn't being good. It's being conditioned, being trained to please, being kept in a perpetual state of fear and emotional dependence. And you deserve to escape that. But to do so, you need to face a brutal question. Is your goodness born of love or of fear? Because if it's born of fear, it's not goodness. It's armor. It's a shield. It's a prison. And you weren't made to live imprisoned. You were made to become whole. The Prince in You. Strategy, image, and personal power, according to Machiavelli. You've spent your life believing you'd be recognized for your essence, that it would be enough to be sincere, fair, humble, and people would see your truth. But Machiavelli, over 500 years ago, wrote a sentence that pierces through any naive idealism like a dagger. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few feel what you really are. Niccolò Machiavelli, the Prince. This phrase is both a blow and a revelation. It shows us that the world doesn't respond to your inner truth. The world responds to your image, to what you represent, to the impact you make, to the fear or respect you inspire. It's cruel for sure, but it's real. And as long as you live hoping they'll notice your good intentions, you'll continue to be ignored by those who know how to play the game. Because life, whether you like it or not, is a game of perception. And Machiavelli didn't write to create monsters. He wrote to teach survival. He knew that in a world populated by wolves, being merely a lamb is asking to be devoured. But there is a way out, and it begins with a new kind of virtue. Not the virtue preached by moralists, which demands purity, passivity, and submission, but the Machiavellian virtue, a mixture of courage, strategic intelligence, emotional coolness, and firm presence. Machiavelli said that the prince, the one who wants to govern their life and not be governed by it, should be like two animals, the fox and the lion. The prince must be a fox to recognize traps and a lion to frighten wolves. This metaphor is one of the most brutal and most liberating ever written. The fox is cunning. It observes, reads the environment, perceives hidden intentions, knows when to be silent and when to move. It doesn't trust blindly. It sees through masks. The lion, on the other hand, commands respect. He doesn't explain himself. He doesn't apologize. His presence is enough to say, "Not with me." He doesn't need to be cruel. He needs to be unavoidable. And here's the key. You need to be both. You need to see the emotional games before they swallow you whole. And you need to be strong enough to make others think twice before testing your limits. Because as much as it hurts, that's what the world respects: presence, boundaries, consequences. You don't have to stop being sensitive, generous, compassionate, but you need to understand that these qualities, without a framework, without structure, without limits, become traps. The same compassion that cures can also destroy you if given to someone who only wants to use you. That's why Machiavelli invites us to stop seeking approval and start building internal authority. Not the authority that shouts, that dominates, that imposes fear through brute force, but the one that commands respect through firm silence, through the clarity of no, through the courage to be oneself without kneeling for acceptance. And here's the turning point. You don't have to become a tyrant. You need to stop being a ghost. The world treats those with power well, and this power begins with your ability to say enough, to stop justifying yourself, to understand that not everyone deserves explanations, and much less your best. You don't need to shout to be heard. You just need to stop asking permission to exist. The image you project has weight, and if you present yourself as someone always accessible, always nice, always willing, you'll be treated as a resource. And a resource can be discarded at any time. But when you present yourself with presence, with a steady gaze, with a clear voice, with an unnegotiable posture, you start to change how the world sees you. And more importantly, you start to change how you see yourself. Because the greatest power Machiavelli teaches isn't to dominate others. It's to stop being dominated by the fear of displeasing. You can indeed be loved, but being feared, in the sense of being taken seriously, of representing a force, is often the safest path to being respected. And respect is the foundation of any true relation. Without it, everything is theater. So look at yourself now. Have you been a fox, or do you keep falling into emotional traps? Have you been a lion, or do you roar internally while smiling on the outside? Is the image you project aligned with the value you carry, or do you present yourself as small, hoping the world will notice your hidden greatness? The prince in this context is you. Yes, you. You need to wake up. You need to shed the cloak of innocence and wear the armor of clarity. You need to learn that being strategic isn't betraying your essence. It's protecting your truth. And more, it's giving yourself the right to choose who you give your best to. Because your best isn't an obligation, it's a gift. And a gift should only be given to those who honor it, not to those who merely consume it. Freedom or approval? The brutal choice between being loved and being free. It's time for the question you've avoided your whole life. Do you want to be loved, or do you want to be free? Sounds cruel, doesn't it? Almost inhuman, but it's the choice Machiavelli silently forces you to make. Because the pursuit of being loved, when based on fear, on need, on emotional dependence, is the most subtle of prisons. And worse, it's a prison where you yourself lock the door. You don't need bars when you have the need for approval. You don't need handcuffs when you're afraid to displease. You don't need external censorship when you live sabotaging yourself internally to fit into others' expectations. The truth no one wants to face is this. The obsession with being seen as good, nice, or agreeable doesn't come from virtue. It comes from the shame of being who you are. And this shame is sneaky. It disguises itself as humility, dresses in kindness, masks itself as empathy, but deep down, it's just your secret belief that you're not sufficient as you are. That's why you mold yourself, recalibrate yourself, adapt to every environment, every person. You say yes when you mean no. You forgive too quickly. You smile when everything inside you wants to scream. And then, before you know it, you've spent your life trying to maintain an image that isn't even yours. You've become what others needed you to be, and you've forgotten who you were before that. The man who lives only to be loved will always be a slave to the eyes of others. He who wishes to be free must be willing to be misunderstood. This phrase isn't by Machiavelli, but it could be, because what he teaches us is that freedom begins when you stop caring about what others expect of you and start living according to what you demand of yourself. But don't be fooled. This path isn't sweet, it's arid, solitary. Many people will pull away. They'll say you've changed, that you've become cold, that you're strange. And you'll ask yourself, am I being cruel? No, you're finally being honest. And honesty, after years of self-deception, frightens, bothers, because it breaks the invisible pact you had with the world. I sacrificed myself, and in return, you love me. But the currency they paid you with was counterfeit. It wasn't love, it was convenience. And when you decide to step out of the role of the nice person, the one who understands everything, the one who accepts everything, you break that pact and begin to write a new contract with yourself. I will be loyal to my truth, even if it costs me the acceptance of those who only knew how to love me when I was silent. True freedom demands that you let go of the character. It demands that you tolerate the discomfort of not pleasing everyone. It demands that you meet the gaze of those who disapprove without lowering your eyes. Because the love that's worth it doesn't demand your self-annihilation. And the respect that strengthens you isn't born of submission. It's born of coherence, of the courage to be whole, of the audacity to be self-sufficient. And here's the most brutal part of all. No one will free you. There won't be applause, no diploma, no finish line with fireworks saying, "Congratulations, now you're free." You'll have to free yourself alone, in the silence, in the discomfort, in the contained anger that you'll transform into clarity, in the old pain that you'll use as a foundation. And when that happens, something changes forever. You no longer beg for affection. You no longer plead for recognition. You choose. You decide for whom to open your doors and for whom to keep them closed. This is being a prince of yourself. It's abandoning the false throne of the loved nice person and taking over the kingdom of your truth. Yes, you can continue to be a good person, but not a good person at the cost of your soul. Not a good person who accepts everything silently. Not someone who erases themselves in the name of a goodness that only serves others. Because if that's the case, then you're not good. You're domesticated. And no one was born for that. So I ask you now directly, without circumlocution. Do you want to be loved or do you want to be free? The answer isn't in your head. It's in your choices and in what you're going to do from here on. You've gone through 4 layers, deconstructed the idea of goodness, recognized the roots of your submissive behavior, discovered the strategic power hidden in Machiavelli's ideas, and finally faced the most difficult choice of adult life, pleasing the world or finally being true to yourself. The answer may still be echoing within you, and that's okay. Real transformations don't come with fanfare. They come with silence, pain, and sometimes a little anger. But it's in that discomfort that the truest changes are born. The world respects who respects themselves. The rest is just theater, and you deserve to leave the stage and assume the script. If you've made it this far, probably something inside you already doesn't fit the old fantasy of being good at any cost. And that fissure, that crack in your social persona, is the beginning of your liberation. I remember the first time I realized my goodness was destroying me. It was in a conversation with a friend I admired. Someone who, without knowing it, always told me the same thing with their eyes. You're too kind for this world. At the time, I thought it was a compliment. Today, I see it was a warning. I accepted everything, gave myself, stayed silent, adapted. But one day after another situation where I found myself being ignored, I felt a rage that burned inside me. Rage at others, perhaps, but mainly rage at myself. That night, I wrote a phrase on a piece of paper and left it stuck to my mirror. Being good isn't erasing yourself. Being good is having the courage to exist fully. It took me years to understand the weight of that. And maybe you're in that same process now. And if you are, I just want to tell you, I see you. This channel, these videos, these scripts aren't about lecturing. They're about lighting candles in dark corridors where many walk alone. And if one of those candles illuminated something within you today, it was worth it. If you still haven't subscribed to the channel, that's fine. Keep being nice. Keep letting life run you over. The algorithm loves those who live to please. Now, if you're ready to stop being the tamed version of yourself, hit like, comment below the last time you said no without guilt, and subscribe. Not because I asked, but because from now on, you only do what you choose to do. Oh, and the videos appearing on the screen right now? One of them will irritate you, the other will liberate you, but I won't tell you which is which. You'll have to discover that for yourself, like every transformation that really matters.